My terrifying 1960s Skinwalker encounter. Chapter 1. The Man Who Never Slept Again. I haven't had a single full night of sleep since 1965. Not one. I'm an old man now. My hands tremble when I pour my coffee, my bones ache with the memory of long past winters, and my face, well, my face is a roadmap of sleepless years. You can see the decades etched deep beneath my eyes, dark and hollow as canyons. People have tried to explain it away. Friends, doctors, even my own children. They called it stress, trauma, guilt, age. They prescribed pills that knocked me out cold for a few hours but never truly let me rest. Because it isn't my mind that keeps me awake. It's what my mind remembers. It's the fear. The same fear that's been with me every night for nearly 60 years. The fear that there are things in this world older than our understanding. Things that walk where they shouldn't, wearing shapes they were never meant to wear. These days, people talk about them like movie monsters. On the internet, in podcasts, in horror stories. They call them skinwalkers. But that word, naaldlooshii, it doesn't belong to me. It's Navajo. It carries a meaning far older, far darker than the pop culture version you see online. And though my encounter didn't happen in their lands of Arizona or New Mexico, I've never found another word that fits what I saw that night in the mountains of Colorado. I've tried not to speak about it, tried not to think about it. The Navajo say talking about these beings can draw their attention, like whispering a name into the dark. I used to believe that. But now, at my age, I think it's simpler. You don't have to call them back, because they never really leave. What I'm about to tell you isn't a ghost story. It's not a legend or a campfire tale meant to thrill. It's a memory, raw, uninvited, and still sharp enough to draw blood. It's the reason my nights are endless. The reason I keep every light on when the sun goes down. The reason I sometimes wake to the sound of my own name whispered from the corner of an empty room. I've kept this secret buried for decades, hoping that silence could protect me. But lately, the dreams have returned. The same place, the same sound of windless trees, the same pale eyes staring from the dark. Maybe telling it now, before my time runs out, will finally put it to rest. Or maybe it will only remind it that I'm still here. Either way, this is the truth. The story of the night that turned a young man's adventure into a lifetime of fear. The story of what waited for me in the woods of Colorado in the summer of 1965. The story of why I have never, ever slept again. Chapter 2. The Summer of 65. I was 20 years old that summer, and like every 20-year-old, I thought I was untouchable. The world felt wide open, a story waiting for me to write myself into it. I'd just spent a year breaking my back at a lumberyard, saving every dollar I could for one thing, a brand new cherry red Ford F-100. That truck was more than a vehicle. It was a promise, a symbol that I could go anywhere, do anything. So when August rolled around, I decided to take it on its maiden voyage, a solo trip deep into the wilderness. No friends, no family, no distractions. Just me, the mountains, and the hum of the open road. My destination was the Uncompahgre National Forest in western Colorado, a place that sounded like something out of myth. Even the name had weight to it, like an echo from another time. I packed light but proud. A new canvas tent, a Coleman stove, a wool sleeping bag that smelled faintly of store dust. I remember the drive like it was yesterday. The windows rolled down, the radio sputtering static and guitar riffs, the smell of gasoline and pine. Every mile west felt like a mile closer to freedom. The plains gave way to foothills, then to the towering spires of the Rockies. The air grew cooler, thinner, cleaner. By the time I turned off the highway onto a rugged Forest Service road, civilization had already faded into memory. The dirt track snaked through a cathedral of pines. The canopy swallowed the light in shifting patterns of green and gold. My truck jolted and bounced, the suspension creaking, but I didn't care. The deeper I drove, the more alive I felt. I passed no other cars, saw no hikers or cabins, just endless wilderness. And for the first time, I understood what true solitude felt like. It wasn't loneliness, it was liberation. Late in the afternoon, I found my spot, a clearing framed by a sheer wall of granite and a stand of tall, pale aspens. Their bark gleamed white in the sunlight, bone-like and silent. A stream trickled nearby, threading through stones like liquid glass. It was perfect. Too perfect, maybe. The kind of place that felt untouched, waiting. I parked the F100 so its headlights faced the clearing, unpacked my gear, and built a small fire ringed with river stones. As dusk settled, the valley turned violet, then blue. The air cooled fast. I cooked beans and hot dogs, feeling proud of my little frontier kingdom. When the fire caught and flared, the shadows danced like living things around the camp. And then, something changed. At first, it was subtle. The chirping of crickets began to fade. The soft rustle of leaves went still. Even the stream seemed to hush. The silence grew thicker, heavier, unnatural. My smile faltered. Forests are never truly silent. But this was absolute. A sound vacuum pressing against my eardrums, making my breath too loud in my chest. I told myself it was nothing. A predator nearby, maybe. Nature's way of holding its breath. But as I stared into that black wall of trees, I couldn't shake the feeling that something out there was holding its breath too. And listening. Chapter 3. The silence beneath the trees. The silence didn't return all at once. It sank, slow and deliberate, like a fog you don't notice until you're already lost in it. One minute I could hear the stream, the night birds, the occasional crackle of wood. The next, nothing. The forest wasn't quiet, it was mute. Even the wind seemed to die before it could reach me. The only sound left was the steady burn of my fire and my own pulse thrumming in my ears. I tried to laugh it off. Just nerves, I muttered. City kid in the big woods. But the sound of my own voice felt wrong, thin and fragile against that heavy stillness. The flames flickered higher, and I realized my hands were trembling. The darkness beyond the firelight looked thicker than it should have been, almost alive. A wall of ink that swallowed everything beyond its edge. I threw another log onto the fire, more for comfort than warmth. Sparks shot upward, vanishing into the black. The trees stood like a row of silent witnesses, their white trunks ghostly in the faint light, their tops vanishing into nothing. Every instinct screamed that something was watching me. The strange part is that I wasn't scared yet. Not really. It was more like my body knew something before my brain did, a slow creeping alertness, a tightening in my gut, like the way animals freeze before an earthquake. I forced myself to move, to break the spell. I checked my gear, adjusted the tent stakes, busied myself with pointless tasks. But no matter how many times I circled the camp, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was the intruder here. When I finally crawled into my tent, I left my boots on. I told myself it was because the ground was cold, but that was a lie. Deep down, I didn't want to be caught unprepared. The fabric of the tent felt impossibly thin, a single layer between me and the vast, listening dark. I lay in my sleeping bag, staring at the glowing orange flicker from the dying fire through the canvas. My heartbeat was a drum in the stillness. Minutes dragged into hours. I waited for the forest to come back to life, for a cricket or a breeze or the distant hoot of an owl. Anything. But there was nothing. Just that suffocating quiet, pressing closer with every breath. I tried to close my eyes, but every time I did, I imagined shapes moving just beyond the tent walls. Once, I could have sworn I heard a sound, a low creak, like footsteps on wet earth. I held my breath until my lungs ached. When it didn't come again, I told myself it was the fire shifting. I must have lain there for hours, half awake, caught between exhaustion and terror. Eventually, my thoughts blurred, time lost meaning, and I drifted into the uneasy half-sleep that comes when your body gives up but your mind refuses. But the forest never made another sound that night. Not one. And somehow, that was worse than anything I could have imagined hearing. Chapter 4. The footprint in the mud. When morning came, it felt like breaking the surface after being held underwater. Light poured through the canvas, sharp and silver, and the first sound I heard was birdsong. Real, normal birdsong. The forest was alive again, chattering, rustling, singing like nothing had ever been wrong. I unzipped the tent, blinked into the daylight, and laughed. It came out shaky, but it was laughter all the same. I must have looked ridiculous, standing there in my boots and jacket, breathing like a drowning man who just found air. The fire had burned down to a soft bed of white ash. The stream gurgled cheerfully nearby. Everything was ordinary again. The kind of ordinary that makes you question your own sanity. I told myself it had been nerves, isolation, maybe altitude. It was easy to believe that with the sun on my face. Still, curiosity gnawed at me. If the forest had fallen silent because of a predator, there should have been signs, tracks, claw marks, something. I decided to take a look. The air was cool and clean as I walked the perimeter of the clearing. At first, all I saw were deer prints, chipmunk trails, the scuffle of something small in the underbrush. But then, near the edge of the stream, I froze. There it was, a single print pressed into the damp soil. At first glance it looked canine, but the longer I stared, the less sense it made. It was too long, too narrow. The front half looked like an animal's paw, but the back, it wasn't right. It looked almost like the heel of a human foot, and there were 5 toes, not 4, 5. My skin crawled. I crouched down, the world narrowing to that shape in the mud. The detail was so crisp, so deliberate. You could see the lines where weight had sunk in, the drag where something heavy had shifted. I looked for more prints, for any hint of direction, but there was only that one, a single impossible step, as though whatever made it had walked out of the trees and then disappeared. I stayed there too long, staring. My breath fogged in the cool air, and for a moment I could almost feel eyes on me again. The same weight as last night, silent and curious. I straightened and forced a laugh. "A bear," I said aloud. "A weird print, that's all." But the words tasted wrong, like lies spoken into a church. The forest didn't answer. I went about the rest of the morning pretending everything was fine. Boiled coffee, packed gear, scribbled in my notebook. But I couldn't stop glancing toward that spot near the stream. Every gust of wind made me jump. The aspen trees looked like tall, pale figures watching from the edges. The longer I stayed, the more that perfect campsite began to feel wrong, as if I had wandered somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. By afternoon, I decided to hike a short loop trail I'd marked on my map, just to shake the nerves. But not even an hour in, the forest betrayed me. The trail faded, landmarks moved. A boulder that should have been on my left was now on my right. And the sun, it seemed to hang in the wrong part of the sky. I turned in circles, panic creeping in like frost. I wasn't lost in the normal sense. It was worse. It felt like the woods themselves were moving around me, closing in, twisting my sense of direction until I didn't trust what I saw. When I finally stumbled back into my clearing, gasping, the sun was already low. The forest was quiet again, waiting. and I knew with a certainty that sank to my bones I was no longer alone in those woods. Chapter 5. The Voice in the Dark. Night fell fast, as if someone had cut the sky loose. One heartbeat it was dusk, the next it was pitch black, a darkness so complete it felt like being buried alive. I built the fire bigger this time, feeding it greedily, the flames throwing long, twitching shadows against the rock wall. I dragged my folding chair close, back against the cold steel of my truck, hatchet in hand. I told myself I was prepared. I wasn't. The forest quieted again, but this time it didn't fade slowly. It stopped, like a switch being flipped. The crickets, the wind, even the stream, gone. The silence pressed down harder than before, thick enough to taste. The fire crackled too loud, every spark a gunshot in that void. Then came the sound. At first, I thought it was my imagination. A faint scratching from somewhere behind me. I turned toward the trees, straining to see past the firelight. Nothing. The sound came again, closer this time, a low scrape, like claws on bark. I swallowed hard, throat dry as paper. And then, the whisper. It was faint, barely audible, but it was there. A murmur that rose and fell like a breath. I held my own breath to listen. It wasn't the wind. There was no wind. The voice was forming words, too soft to make out, but definitely words. My scalp prickled. I stood, gripping the hatchet so tight my knuckles burned. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice breaking the stillness like shattering glass. Silence, then a response. "Jamis!" It said my name. The voice came from the darkness beyond the firelight. Soft, feminine, familiar. My mother's voice. The exact tone she used to call me in for dinner when I was a boy. For one horrible second, my brain believed it. My body almost moved toward the sound. Then reason caught up, and I froze. My mother was 500 miles away. The voice called again. "Jams, come here, honey!" It was moving, circling, always staying just beyond the fire's reach. The tone changed slightly, less human each time it spoke. Something inside me broke open, a primal, wordless terror I didn't know I was capable of feeling. "What do you want?" I screamed. No answer, only the fire's roar. Then a new sound, a heavy, rhythmic dragging. Thump, scrape, thump, scrape, like something massive pulling itself through the undergrowth. The smell came next. Wet fur, rotting soil, and something sweet and metallic. Blood. I backed up until I felt the truck against my spine. My legs shook uncontrollably. The dragging stopped just at the edge of the light. I couldn't see it, but I felt it, like static crawling under my skin. Then came a sound I can still hear when the night is quiet, a wet clicking noise, like bone on bone. And from the blackness, a whisper that wasn't my mother's anymore. It rasped, dry and cold, with a voice that belonged nowhere on this earth. Mine. That single word shattered every last bit of courage I had. I bolted. I dove into the truck, slammed the door, locked it, curled up on the bench seat like a terrified child. Outside, something began to circle. Slow footsteps in the gravel, a claw tracing lazy lines along the metal. Tap, tap, tap. It moved from window to window, pausing each time, as if deciding whether to come in. And I realized it knew I was in there. It was waiting for me to move, so I didn't. I stayed frozen in that cab all night, trembling, praying for dawn. And outside, the thing that had called my name whispered and circled. And laughed. Chapter 6. The Longest Night. I don't know how long I sat there in that truck. Hours, maybe an eternity. Fear stretches time into something unrecognizable. The cab felt smaller with every breath, like the air itself was thinning. The windows fogged with my breath, and each shallow exhale sounded too loud, too human. Outside, That thing never stopped moving. The sounds came in waves, slow, deliberate pacing through gravel, then silence, then the faint scrape of claws against metal. Every few minutes came a tap on the glass, gentle at first. Tap, tap, tap. Always 3 times. Always right by my head. When I couldn't stand it, I'd squeeze my eyes shut and whisper prayers I hadn't used since childhood. At some point, a new sound joined the rest, whispering. Low, guttural, and constant. The words weren't English, but there was intent behind them. A rhythm. Like someone speaking a language too old for human mouths. Sometimes it sounded like 2 voices, overlapping, answering each other in hushed, broken tones. When I finally dared to look, I wiped the fog from the windshield with a shaking hand. The fire was nearly out, only a faint red glow remained, barely enough to paint the clearing in embers. Shadows moved beyond that dying light. They were tall and wrong, gliding more than walking, occasionally freezing mid-step, like they knew I was watching. I tried to make sense of them, to fit them into the shape of a bear or a man. But they weren't either. Then, from the driver's side window, a thud. Something heavy pressed against the glass. I turned, and for a split second, I saw it. A face. It was close enough to fog the window. The eyes were pale, reflective, like an animal's in headlights, but filled with intelligence, cruel, focused intelligence. The skin around them looked stretched, thin as paper, pulled over bone. I couldn't see its whole face, just fragments illuminated by the fire's last glow, a suggestion of a muzzle, a snarl, something that shouldn't have been able to stand upright. And then it smiled. The corners of its mouth cracked when it did, splitting the skin. A low rasp slid through the glass, almost a laugh, but not quite. It stayed there, breathing against the window, long enough for me to see the condensation bloom and fade. Then it was gone. After that, I stopped looking. I pressed my forehead to my knees, covered my ears, and waited for morning. Every second dragged. The whispering never stopped. Sometimes the voices turned into laughter, sometimes crying. I couldn't tell if they were mocking me or mourning something. The night didn't end like other nights. It didn't fade into dawn. It broke into it. A sudden change in the light, a whisper of birdsong, a crack of wind through branches, and suddenly the world was back. I opened my eyes to see sunlight filtering through the windshield. The fire was dead, my truck was coated in dew, and the woods looked exactly as they had before. Peaceful. Empty. For a few long moments I sat there, paralyzed by disbelief. Had I imagined it all? The silence, the voice, the face. The forest seemed to mock me with its calm. But when I finally stepped out of the truck, the first thing I saw were the footprints. Dozens of them, all around the clearing, each one pressed deep into the earth, circling the truck like predators around a carcass, and every single one of them had 5 toes. Chapter 7. Proof in the morning light. The morning light didn't bring relief, it brought evidence. The clearing, which only hours ago had felt like a safe haven, now looked like a crime scene. The air was unnaturally still, the stream's quiet murmur the only sound. My breath came out shaky as I crouched beside the first track. There were so many of them, deep, wet impressions in the earth, circling the truck in deliberate arcs, some close enough that I could see where the soil had been pressed by weight. 5 toes. Always 5. And at the back, that same awful distortion. Not quite a paw, not quite a human heel. Each print pointed inward, toward me. I followed them as far as the edge of the clearing, where they vanished into the trees. No scuff marks, no sign of where the creature had entered or left. It was as if they'd simply appeared around my camp, walked their circles, and dissolved back into the forest air. I stood there a long time, the cold seeping into my skin. Logic clawed for explanations, maybe a prank. But who would be this deep in the mountains? There were no roads, no cabins, no people for miles. I'd seen no one for 2 days. No, this wasn't human mischief. The pattern was too precise, too patient. My gaze drifted to the side of my truck. Long scratches traced across the red paint, thin curved lines running parallel from door to tailgate. I reached out and brushed my fingertips along one. The metal was gouged. Whatever had made them wasn't small. I looked at my reflection in the window, pale, wide-eyed, trembling. I looked like a man who had just met the impossible and knew it wasn't finished with him. I don't remember packing. I just remember the panic. Every snap of a twig made me flinch. Every gust of wind sounded like breathing. I threw my supplies into the truck bed, glancing over my shoulder with every movement. The forest seemed closer than before, the trees leaning inward, listening. I wanted to leave. Every cell in my body screamed to get out. But part of me, a stupid, curious part, needed to see it again, to prove to myself that what I saw wasn't madness. So I hesitated. That hesitation was my mistake. I decided to check the fire pit to make sure it was cold. When I knelt down beside it, I noticed something half buried in the ash. My metal coffee cup, bent, dented, the rim crushed inward as though someone or something had squeezed it between its fingers. That was the moment the truth finally broke through my denial. I wasn't imagining this. I wasn't having some mountain fever hallucination. Something had been here with me, something intelligent enough to mimic, to taunt, to play. I grabbed the cup and threw it into the truck bed. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my keys twice before jamming them into the ignition. The engine rumbled to life with a sound that felt like salvation. But as I backed up to turn onto the dirt track, I caught movement in the mirror. Something pale between the trees. It was gone before I could look twice, but I swear to this day it wasn't an animal. It was standing, watching me leave. I floored the gas. I told myself I'd never look back, but some part of me knew the story wasn't over. Not yet. Chapter 8. The Return of the Silence. I didn't get far, maybe a mile, maybe 2. The dirt road twisted through the forest like a snake, and though I told myself I was heading for the highway, some part of me wasn't sure anymore. Every bend looked the same trees, the same shadows. The sunlight above the canopy was already thinning into the pale grey of late afternoon. That was when the radio died. 1 second it was humming static and half-tuned music. The next, it went silent. Dead, like someone had yanked the plug from the world. The engine sputtered once, coughed, then steadied, but the air inside the cab shifted. Heavier, charged. Then I noticed it again. The same unnatural hush I'd heard that first night. The forest wasn't just quiet, it was listening. I slowed the truck to a crawl, the tires crunching over gravel far too loud in the silence. The hairs on the back of my neck rose, every instinct screaming that stopping was the last thing I should do. But I couldn't help it. Curiosity, or maybe terror disguised as caution, made me press the brake and listen. Nothing, no wind, no birds, no distant flow of the stream, just the faint tick of the cooling engine. I rolled down the window an inch. The air that slipped in was colder than it should have been. It smelled faintly of wet soil and rot, the same smell that had seeped through the clearing the night before. Something moved behind the trees, not much, just a flicker, a suggestion of motion, pale and slow, between 2 trunks. My breath caught. I stared until my eyes watered, but it was gone. I gripped the steering wheel, whispering to myself, "It's not real. It's not real." Then something answered. Not a voice this time. Not yet. Just a sound that didn't belong. A low hum, deep enough to vibrate through the floorboards. It wasn't mechanical. It was alive. The kind of sound you feel in your bones, like a growl pitched too low for hearing. The trees ahead seemed to shiver, though there was no wind. I slammed the truck into gear, foot shaking on the pedal. The tires spun against the dirt before catching traction. The forest blurred past, a tunnel of grey trunks and shadows flashing like strobe lights. The road ahead twisted downhill, and I followed it too fast, heart hammering, until the engine roared and the world became motion and noise again. When I finally reached a flatter stretch, I risked a glance in the rearview mirror. For a moment, all I saw were trees. Then something stepped between them. It was far, maybe 50 yards back, but it was upright, tall. Its arms hung low, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, like it didn't quite understand how to hold itself. I blinked, and it was gone. I didn't stop. I drove until the forest opened up into a clearing I didn't recognize. A wide patch of dirt surrounded by skeletal aspens. The sun was dipping behind the peaks, turning everything the color of dying embers. I didn't want to camp again, but I couldn't drive safely in the dark, not on those roads. So I parked. I told myself I'd rest for an hour, then move on, just an hour. But as night crept down those mountains and the shadows stretched long across the hood of my truck, the silence returned, patient, suffocating, and absolute. And I knew, without a doubt, that it had followed me. Chapter 9. What Watches in the Trees. By the time the last light died behind the peaks, I'd already given up on rest. The fire I built was small this time, not the roaring blaze from before. I didn't want to draw attention, though part of me knew that if it wanted to find me, fire wouldn't stop it. The forest pressed close on all sides, the trees so pale they seemed to glow. Every crackle of the fire sounded too sharp, every shadow too deliberate. I sat on the tailgate, staring into the dark, listening. Nothing, no birds, no wind, no crickets, just the hollow pulse in my ears. The silence was alive again, heavy with awareness. It wasn't emptiness, it was presence. Something was out there, waiting. Then the smell came. Faint at first, wet earth, rotting leaves, and that coppery tang I'd come to dread. I held my breath. The air felt charged, humming with static. The fire popped, and a shower of sparks leapt into the air like startled insects. That's when I saw it. Movement, slow, intentional. Between the trees, it wasn't walking like an animal. It moved wrong, too upright, but not human either. Its limbs bent oddly, its gait uneven, as if it were still learning how to wear the shape it was in. When it passed behind one of the aspens, I caught a flash of pale skin where fur should have been, and a long, narrow arm ending in something that looked far too much like a hand. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. My body locked up, breath caught halfway. The thing moved closer, step by deliberate step, until it reached the edge of the firelight. I could see its outline now. Tall, gaunt, the shape of a man blurred with the features of a beast. The firelight shimmered on its eyes, and they reflected it back as two dim yellow orbs. For a moment, it just stood there, head tilted, studying me. Then it spoke. Not with words, not at first. The sound that came from it was broken, fragmented, like someone trying to remember how speech worked. Then, horribly, it found my name. "Charms!" The voice cracked on the second syllable, sliding from deep to shrill in a single breath. It sounded like a recording played through torn speakers. My name, repeated, twisted, pulled apart until it was nothing but a rasp. I backed toward the truck, keeping the fire between us. My heartbeat drowned out everything else. It didn't move, it just watched. The smell grew stronger, thick enough to taste. Then, slowly, it raised one long, human-like arm. The hand hung limp at first, then the fingers twitched, curling inward as if testing the motion. It pointed at me, "Mine," it whispered. The sound didn't come from its mouth. It came from everywhere: the trees, the ground, the air. Something inside me broke. I turned, lunged for the driver's door, and threw myself inside. I slammed it shut, locked it, started the engine, or tried to. The key turned, but the starter groaned uselessly, coughing like a dying animal. Outside, the thing began to move again. Slowly, deliberately, each step scraping the earth. The firelight caught its shape again, the hollow ribs, the stretched skin, the eyes like dull gold coins. It didn't hurry, it didn't need to, because it knew, just as I did, that I had nowhere left to run. Chapter 10. The Morning of the Unholy. The key turned again and again, grinding metal against metal. Nothing. The engine refused to catch. My trembling hand slipped on the ignition, sweat slicking my palms. The silence outside thickened, pressing against the cab like a living thing. Every nerve in my body screamed to move, but the truck, my one salvation, was dead. Then I heard it, the crunch of footsteps in the gravel. Slow, heavy, measured. Each step came closer to the driver's door until I could feel the vibration through the floorboard. I dared a glance toward the window, and that's when it leaned into view. It was standing upright, wrongly upright, its body jerking in small spasms, like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. Its head tilted too far to one side, its neck popping with the motion. The face was a nightmare of familiarity and distortion. A coyote's muzzle stretched across human bone, patches of grey fur clinging to skin the colour of spoiled meat. Its eyes were pale gold, reflective and intelligent. It stared at me for a moment too long, then it smiled. The lips pulled back too far, revealing teeth that didn't belong in any creature born of this earth. Jagged, cracked things like shards of glass. The skin around its mouth split as it grinned, dark fluid trickling down its chin. It reached out one hand. No, not a paw. A hand. Its fingers long and bony, tipped with claws like knives. It dragged them slowly down the glass, the sound piercing, high and metallic. Scree! The noise shot through my skull like electricity. I shouted without meaning to, slammed my palm against the horn. The blaring sound ripped through the silence, startling even the creature. It jerked back, its grin vanishing. And that's when the engine roared to life. I didn't think, didn't breathe. I threw the truck into reverse and stomped on the gas. The tires spun in the dirt, throwing up stones and dust. The creature stepped backward, blinking in the sudden flood of the headlights. For one horrifying second, I saw it clearly. It was tall, easily 7 feet, and its body seemed to shimmer, like heat rising off asphalt. Beneath the thin fur, the skin was stretched over ribs that moved as if something beneath them was shifting. Its hands, God, those hands, ended in human fingers, split open at the tips to reveal claws. It looked both real and impossible, like something caught halfway through becoming. It snarled, an awful, bubbling sound that didn't belong in any throat. Behind it, between the trees, another shape shifted, lower, darker, moving with a rippling fluidity that didn't obey gravity. There was more than one. I slammed the gear into drive. The headlights cut across both figures, and for an instant they froze, caught like spectres in a photograph. The first one turned its head slowly toward me, and in that flicker of time, our eyes met. There was no animal instinct in that gaze, only hate. I floored the accelerator. The truck lunged forward, rocks spitting from the tires. I heard a shriek behind me, high, furious, inhuman. The rearview mirror flashed movement, 2 figures darting across the road, one on all fours, one stumbling like a drunk man learning to walk. I didn't look again. I kept my eyes locked on the thin stretch of road ahead, hands white-knuckled on the wheel. The truck bounced violently over ruts and stones, headlights flickering with each jolt. Branches scraped against the sides, clawing metal with shrill protest. Then, as suddenly as it began, the world shifted. A beam of sunlight cut through the trees, slicing across the hood like a blade. The forest opened. The sound of the engine filled the air again, real and grounding. When I hit the paved highway, I nearly sobbed with relief. I didn't stop, not for an hour, not until the mountains were a distant memory in my rearview mirror. But even then, with the sun high above me and civilization on the horizon, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still back there, watching, waiting. Chapter 11. The Aftermath. When the tires finally hit pavement, I pulled over. The engine idled rough beneath my shaking hands, but I didn't kill it. I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. The sunlight felt wrong, too bright, too clean for the world I'd just come from. My chest heaved with shallow breaths that wouldn't slow down. The road stretched empty in both directions. Not a single car, not even a distant echo of one. The only sound was the truck, rumbling softly like it too was trying to catch its breath. I wiped sweat from my face and felt grit, dried tears and soot from the fire. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked like a stranger, eyes bloodshot, lips cracked, skin pale as chalk. I looked older, harder. I don't remember much of the drive home, only flashes, gas stations, the hollow stare of attendants, the way people seemed to look at me for a second too long before glancing away. Once in the mirror of a restroom, I saw a smear on my cheek, something dark and rusty brown. I rubbed it off and didn't want to think about what it was. When I finally pulled into my parents' driveway, the morning sun had dulled into afternoon haze. My mother came running out of the house, smiling at first, then freezing when she saw my face. I stumbled from the truck, words tumbling out in broken pieces about the forest, the voice, the thing I'd seen. She listened, but her eyes filled with worry instead of fear. My father joined her, his jaw set, arms crossed. "You were overtired," he said finally. "The mountains can mess with your head. Altitude, exhaustion. Bears sound strange at night. You probably just—" "Dad," I cut him off. "It said my name." He frowned, but his eyes softened with something like pity. That look hurt worse than disbelief. They made me eat, made me bathe, made me lie down. I didn't argue. I was too tired to. But when darkness fell, the familiar dread returned, sharp as a blade between the ribs. My room felt wrong, too quiet, too dark. Every creak of the house made my heart jump. I turned on my bedside lamp and left it on all night. Sleep didn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it again, its face lit by dying firelight, its yellow eyes fixed on mine, the casual way it had picked up my coffee cup like a man might lift a trophy. The next morning, my father told me I'd had a nightmare, that what I remembered wasn't real, but I knew he was wrong. There were scratches down both sides of my truck, long curved gouges that cut through the red paint clean to the metal. He saw them too. He just chose not to speak of them. Days turned into weeks, and I still couldn't sleep. Even when my body collapsed from exhaustion, my mind stayed awake. Always listening, always waiting for the scrape against glass, the whisper of my name in the dark. That was the start of it, the beginning of a lifetime of vigilance. And though 60 years have passed, I've never truly left those woods. They came home with me. Chapter 12. The Thing That Never Left. Time erodes everything, even memory. Faces fade, voices soften, the details of places blur into fog. But not that night, not it. 60 years later, every moment of that encounter is still carved into me like a scar that never healed right. For a long time, I told myself it wasn't real, that I'd imagined it, hallucinated it after too many nights alone. The human mind can build monsters out of loneliness, can twist shadows into living things. I wanted to believe that. I needed to, because the alternative, that something unnatural had marked me, was too heavy to carry. Then, 10 years later, in a small-town library in Arizona, I opened a book on Native American folklore. I wasn't looking for anything. I was just passing time. But I turned a page, and there it was, naaldlooshii, the word I'd only ever heard whispered, the name the Navajo give to those who become something less than human. By means of it, it goes on all fours. The description stopped my breath cold. The mimicry, the shape-shifting, the human hands twisted into claws, the way it moves like a man who's forgotten how to be one. I read that some believe these beings are witches, people who've traded humanity for dark power. Others say they're spirits wearing human skins, but all agree on one thing: once you've seen one, you carry its shadow with you. I closed that book and left without checking it out. I didn't sleep for a week after. Every sound at night, the settling of the house, the wind against the eaves, felt like it had meaning. Sometimes I'd wake up to the faint scrape of a branch across my window and I'd freeze, listening. Was it the wind? Or claws tracing the glass? They say not to speak of these things. That talking about them draws them near. Maybe that's true. But silence hasn't saved me. Silence only lets the memories rot in the dark, and rot always finds a way to spread. So I'm telling it now, not to summon it, not to tempt fate, but to finally name the thing that has haunted me longer than I've been alive. I don't know why it came for me. Maybe I trespassed where I shouldn't have. Maybe I caught its attention by accident. Or maybe it chose me, the way a storm chooses a single tree to strike. I've never gone back to those mountains. I couldn't. I sold the truck, moved across the state, tried to live a normal life. But every night when the world goes still, when the last light fades from the walls, I listen. Sometimes, if I stay quiet long enough, I can almost hear it again. A faint scratching somewhere outside. A breath that doesn't belong. And every now and then, God help me, I swear I hear my mother's voice, soft and patient, calling from the dark. Jammies. Maybe it's memory. Maybe it's madness. Or maybe it's just waiting for me to sleep. But I won't. I can't. Because once you've seen one of them, you never really wake up again.